Good, yeah? It's been a good morning so far? Good. Welcome to, this is really, really exciting, welcome to the world book launch of Dina Salústio's The Madwoman of Serrano. Surely, for a world book launch, we must really make some noise. Yes? And we will keep applauding because it really is a very big deal. I am so delighted to welcome you, Dina and Jethro. If you'll allow me to do some introductions so that we get a sense of who each other are. My name is Aleya Kassam. On my left, on my immediate left, is Dina Salústio. Dina was born on the island of Santo Antão, Cape Verde, thank you very much, in 1941. She's worked as a teacher, a social assistant, and a journalist in Portugal, Angola, and Cape Verde. Her latest publication, the short story collection Filhos de Deus, God's Children, came out in 2018. She is a founding member of the Cape Verdian Writers Association. In 1998, Dina was the first woman in Cape Verde to publish a novel. The first woman. I mean, really, that's another applause, right? She's also the first to have a novel translated into English, The Madwoman of Serrano, which was translated by Jethro here. Congratulations to both of you. If I can give you a little bit of information about Jethro. Hang on. Yes, here we go. Jethro Soutar is an English translator of Spanish and Portuguese with a particular focus on African literature. As an editor at Daedalus Africa, he's committed to making works by untranslated African authors available to a wider audience of book lovers like us. His translation of The Ultimate Tragedy of Abdoulaye Sylla was the first novel from Guinea-Bissau to be translated into English. And his latest work, The Madwoman of Serrano by Dina Salústio, is the first book by a woman from Cape Verde to be published in English. Welcome. The book has been out only for 10 days, which is remarkable, so it really is a first. And it was written, we were talking with Dina earlier, 20 years ago. Shall I pause for translation? You can, at any point. It has been described as a magical, realist, feminist novel. Serrano is a place, a village of 193 souls, including a young madwoman, several infants, and 3 babies on the way. 2 of them twin girls, and also a remote village steeped in strange customs, half beautiful, half woman, half man. If you'll allow me to read a little section so that everybody gets a flavor of the writing. This is I haven't finished it, but it is so beautiful that it's the kind of writing that you keep reading over and over again. There's one particular section that is my favorite. Long forgotten by civilization, Serrano was tucked between 2 remote trails, one that led to the capital and one that headed into the vast forest. It was a place steeped in strange customs, where pacts were made with underground and underwater worlds, where some animals never moved, and where rocks with hard shells and soft centers could dictate the laws of the valley and change them from one day to the next. It was thought that Serrano had first come into being in ancient times, when a giant stone woman was thrown into the sea and her extremities crumbled off to form islands all over the world. At least that was what Loja the peddler said, though no one believed a word that came out of his mouth, chastised as he was for the crime of loving Serrano. All love affairs come at a price, the madwoman would sometimes muse. either for existing or by not being allowed to exist. Among Serrano's 193 creatures were 3 dogs jointly owned by the village's 29 families, dogs who shared in the village's land diseases, which were rare: salt, food, beliefs, and everything else. There was also a spring owned by nobody and known merely as the spring, though all the other springs in the valley had names, as if this one were a shooting star and the others fixtures in the firmament. It's only here on earth that we need to give names to things, Geronimo told his daughter one night, as he directed her gaze to the madding stars. He marveled at the millions of bodies moving about untouched by the sun's rays, then quickly returned to his work, confused by such daring thoughts. The spring could be very demanding, so Geronimo tried to ignore it and avoid becoming its slave, which he already was anyway. He just didn't know it yet. Serrano was turned in on itself, lost among trees and crags, allowed to breathe easily, half beautiful, half woman, half man. It's really, really lush and gorgeous. You wrote this 20 years ago, and you translated this. So I would like to know, where did this come from? What is the story of how this book even came into being?
As origins, o que queria fazer?
Vou falar português.
Como quiser, mas
Can I try to speak English?
Speak your English.
Boa tarde. Hoje eu tive a maior alegria quando na rádio eu disse que falava português e uns jovens que me entrevistaram disseram: fala o teu inglês.
So earlier today, Dina's done a few radio interviews, and she does speak English, but she's a bit uncomfortable and not confident in it. And she felt very proud when the girl interviewing her, she said, "I don't speak. I speak Portuguese. I don't speak English." And the girl said, "You speak your version of English," and she was happy with that.
Quando eu escrevo, eu faço, when I write, I do it with tenderness and respect. When I wrote Serrano, I put more respect because I know the women, I know the men for this history. I know the community. And then when I heard their stories, their feelings, their words, I must put very respect on the book. Eu vou falar em português porque é mais fácil, senão vão passar aqui muito tempo. Eu escrevi este livro pensando nas mulheres da minha comunidade, pensando nas histórias que chegaram até nós.
Okay, so she would prefer to speak in Portuguese so she can express really her ideas. Patience while we do it. As you'll have gathered, she wrote this book, in the community, but really to speak about the women of the community, the role of women.
E quando dizem que este livro Serrano que é uma honra ter sido a primeira mulher a escrever um livro, um romance, eu digo, não sinto assim. Para mim é uma pena, é uma tristeza, porque as minhas avós, a minha mãe, não conseguiram escrever um livro.
And she has mixed emotions when, like earlier, we celebrated her for being the first Cape Verdian woman to publish a book. And of course, she's proud of that, but is also full of pity. It's a shame. Her mother, her grandparents, the other generations of women did not have the opportunity. So although it's great, it also represents a sad situation.
Porque as mulheres na minha terra, no meu país, aliás, como as mulheres em África, ficaram sempre muito analfabetas, muito iletradas.
And this is because the women in Cape Verde, and the same goes for much of Africa, the women were often illiterate, for one thing.
Houve um processo, penso que mundial, global, de esquecimento da mulher, de tirar a memória da mulher, como se ela não existisse.
And I think globally, not just Africa or Cape Verde, there's been a process or even a tactic to make women's memories, to forget them, to remove them, erase them.
Então, até a independência, em 1975, nenhuma mulher tinha publicado um livro. Nenhuma mulher tinha tido voz para falar das coisas dela ou da terra.
So until independence in 1975 in Cape Verde, no woman had the opportunity to write, certainly to have her writing published, and therefore to speak about her experiences.
As minhas avós foram levadas daqui, não do Quênia, mas do continente. Foram compradas aqui, levadas para Cabo Verde.
So my ancestors, women and men, were taken from here, not specifically Kenya, but from the African continent, and were sold.
E como elas iam de lugares muito distantes uns dos outros, não tinham a mesma história, não tinham a mesma língua, não tinham a mesma existência.
And given that they came from such a range of different places, they did not have the same language or the same story or the same background.
Então as histórias que a minha avó me contou são pequenas histórias, pequenos bocados de histórias de vários países da África.
So when my grandma, not my grandma, Dina's grandma, would tell her stories, there would be little pieces, little snippets combined from lots of different stories from different cultures, different countries.
It's enough?
Yes, I want to ask a question. Okay. So this is what I've written down here in my notebook. The idea of being the first is seductive, and yet we are never the first. So I want to call into the space the women before and to ask you, what were the stories that enabled this book to exist?
Então, bom, essas histórias do avô dá uma ideia das histórias que lembras do avô, que ao final tinha uma influência nesta narrativa.
Porque todas as histórias que a minha avó contava e que as avós dela contaram eram histórias de sofrimento, de abandono, eram histórias de fome, de seca, eram histórias de porões, de barcos, porões dos barcos. Eram histórias muito tristes. But
So, all the stories that her grandmother told her, which in turn had been told by her grandmother's grandmother to her, so passed down, they were all very sad. They were about suffering, droughts, pain, boat journeys, not happy stories.
But nestas histórias havia um ponto interessante. É que estas mulheres que foram levadas da África e que se juntaram aos homens que vieram da Europa, deram um povo chamado Cabo Verde.
But there is a a happy side, or at least a side that can be celebrated from these unhappy stories, and that is that the black people brought from Africa and white Europeans who came to Cape Verde, or the islands that became, created a people, and that people are the Cape Verdians.
Thank you, Dina. Jethro, I'd like to ask you, how did this English translation come to be, and what is the book about? I just realized that we haven't actually talked what the book is about.
Yeah. I'm British, but I live in Portugal, and I'm a translator, and as the role of the translator is also you're a scout. You're looking for books that you would like to translate, that have the potential to translate. I think this book, I did not walk into a bookshop in Lisbon and go, oh, African section, Cape Verde, oh, which of the 50 shall I choose from? This one? No. I found the name of the book on I think maybe on a Brazilian student had written about it, and I, through internet Googling, I came across it, tracked down a copy. The first time I tried to read it, I struggled. I mean, I speak Portuguese, but reading, it's dense. You would have got from that passage, there's a lot of words, and it was difficult. And at first I gave up, but it did make me, then I went to Cape Verde and I bought it again and tried again, and it made me realize that maybe a lot of the books that make it into English are the easy ones. You know, I shouldn't give up. If we all give up on the ones that are a bit hard, then they're never going to get there. So I tried harder. Even then, I didn't totally understand it, and I wanted to, and I knew the best way of doing that was to translate it. So that's why I began the process. What's it about? Well, it was very interesting hearing that passage, because it's not so long ago that I worked on it, and that passage I must have translated draft 15. I was very pleased that it came out quite well when you read it, because it was hard. It's about a village. It's about some characters in the village. The Madwoman herself is a presence who is says uncomfortable things, says truths people don't want to necessarily recognize or face up to, and maybe she is a bit mad as well because of the circumstances. So she's dismissed as being mad so that they don't have to pay attention to what she says, and maybe a bit of that also, her circumstances leads her to be a bit mad if anyone's madder than anyone else. It's about the characters in that village. It's about magic. Do magical things happen, or do we call things magic when we don't really want to call them what they were? And often that is violence or suppression to women and their voices in this community. To speak a little bit about the magic, in that passage there is a bit about stones with soft centers and hard that make the rules. I remember meeting Dina in Lisbon. We had lunch and I asked lots of questions, and I said, well, what are these stones? Yeah. And we laughed, and of course that's the benefit of having a dialogue. She can't explain exactly what that is, but it allows me to get the idea of what kind of world we're creating here. Yeah. Then how did it come into existence? Well, okay, so it is a bit silly to reduce things to being a first, but it does. You have to play the game of publishing, and that is a way of getting some funding to say this is the first book by a woman in Cape Verde, this is the first book that would be translated. That helps marketing, that helps things. So I don't mind playing that game if it helps get the books into the hands of readers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jethro, por não ter desistido de mim.
Thank you for not giving up.
What was the process like for you? What does it take for a writer to trust that somebody is going to take your work and translate it into a language that you don't speak?
E primeiro, quando Jethro me disse que ia traduzir o livro, para já foi uma emoção muito grande ter um livro traduzido, porque não é normal nós termos os nossos livros traduzidos para qualquer língua. Nós escrevemos em português para falantes de português e não temos a perspectiva de ser traduzidos para outras línguas.
Well, first of all, quite strange thing this. First of all, when Jethro got in touch with me, oh, hang on. First of all, when I expressed an interest in and I wanted to translate the book, she was very happy. It was an emotionally happy moment because it was totally unexpected. If you're a writer in somewhere like Cape Verde, you're not expecting to be translated into any languages. At best, you're hoping that your work reaches as wide a Portuguese readership as possible.
Porque ser ilhas é termos a insularidade à volta, é não termos contactos com outros países, mesmo com os países de língua portuguesa, os livros não circulam. Os livros do Ngale e do Onjaki não chegam a Cabo Verde.
So that's almost twice as difficult being from Cape Verde. Islands, there's no near neighbours, there's not the usual sort of back and forth that you would get between neighbouring countries. So even from within the Portuguese-speaking world, there's not the same back and forth you'd hope for. She was referencing Ungulani Onjaki's work is not as readily available in Cape Verde as perhaps it should be. I'm not translating now, but Onjaki also said to me, I haven't read this book, I haven't seen it available. So.
E quando o Jethro me disse que ia apresentar o livro ao Pen Club Translate, tradução de Londres, eu disse, então eu não tenho chance, porque já tinha recebido um prémio do Pen Internacional 2 anos antes.
So when Jethro said he was going to put the book forward for English Pen Translates program, I'll explain what that is in a second. I thought, we haven't got a chance because Dina had already been awarded a Pen Prize a few years earlier, a Pen International Prize, as an aside. So how did the book come into existence? I submitted it for English Pen, which is an organisation in London that supports, gives publishers in Britain, pays for the translation, basically. So their criteria is diversity, quality, and contributing to the sort of literary sphere, the English literature sphere. So you send in a sample translation, a synopsis, details of the author, the book, a bit of stuff of why it deserves to be in English. They receive a lot of submissions, and then they choose usually about 10 from all different languages, different countries, and this program is twice a year. And as it says on the front of the book, English Pen Translates. So despite Dina's skepticism, we did get it.
Com este livro eu quis pagar uma dívida para com as mulheres que me contaram histórias.
Writing this book, I felt was something that I owed to women of previous generations.
And perhaps also for women of the future generations, who it feels like a gift almost.
Então, também é algo para as gerações do futuro, mulheres do futuro.
Jethro, I'm curious about language and what it is that we lose in English that perhaps is vivid in Portuguese.
Yeah, I mean, with translation, there's no one solution. You could give that book to 10 translators, you're going to get 10 different versions. As a translator, you agonize over your choice of words, but ultimately you also have to trust in yourself and accept that it's going to be your version. Specifically, in that passage in the beginning, there are one or two adjectives from the Portuguese that I had to remove. English is not so good at so many words, adjectives. To make it flow in English, you sometimes need to reduce. So I have to decide what's the experience the Portuguese reader's having, and how can I make that experience the same in English. And I made the decision that I can best replicate that by maybe removing one or two instead of making it too clunky. Yeah, they're different languages; they work differently. So I would like to think that the lyricism is the same, especially the bits in Serrano, in the village, are like that. In the city, the style's a little bit different, so it's less poetic, less lyrical. So I don't think, I would like to think that when we're not losing things here, there will be different plays on words, different games that take place in Portuguese than in English. The different languages, they do different things, but you have to embrace that rather than be handicapped by it.
And in that same vein, Dina, we were talking earlier about Creole and how Creole was forbidden in Cape Verde before independence. And I'm wondering what you lose when the stories live in Portuguese, or not lose is the wrong word. What changes when the story is in Portuguese versus Creole for you?
As nossas tias, as nossas avós, as vizinhas contavam histórias em crioulo.
So,
o crioulo era proibido, mas em casa falava.
So Creole was forbidden, but at home, the stories we were told by my grandparents, my aunties, other relations, they told us the stories in Creole. So in the house, that was what the stories were told, even though it was forbidden out in the street.
Porque a minha família do lado materno é toda africana.
So on my mother's side, my entire family is African. I would just to throw in something. I translated a novel from Guinea-Bissau where it was written in perfect Portuguese, but quite often there was a game being played with Creole undertones in some of the characters, and that's not the case in this book. I don't think that's what Dina was striving for. She wanted to, if you like, replicate the storytelling joy of her grandparents or grandmothers, aunties, in the language she'd chosen to write. It wasn't making a linguistic point. It was more the storytelling.
So away from language as like linguistics, but more, you touched on this a little bit about the magical element not really being magic, but it kind of being a language of its own. I'd really love to hear more about that from the context of the place.
I mean, my interpretation then would be we're in an isolated community. We're reading the book in Portuguese that's been elegantly written, but the people, I mean, the book makes clear the people themselves don't talk very much. They're not big talkers. Maybe they're not used to that. They don't have the confidence, or they don't have the words, the vocabulary sometimes. So there are sounds. It's a valley. There are sounds. There's a passage where Geronimo moves back from the city and he can't sleep because of the noises in the valley, and so that's a different. There are different words, if you like, or different dialogues going on around and about, and I think that's what some of the lyricism of the setting is going on. Then and again, I don't want to overinterpret the book. You can read it and make your own mind up. But when we move out of Serrano to the city, it's different, and especially the character who grew up in the village but moved to the city, she's a lot more introspective, to the point of sometimes you want to shake her, and she's going round and round with her thoughts and words, and maybe overthinking things sometimes. So there's some of those games going on. That's it.
Eu quero dizer só uma coisa. Eu escrevo em português. Quando as pessoas dizem Dina, este livro, qualquer português podia escrevê-lo. Eu digo não. Só eu podia ter escrito este livro. Eu ou outras mulheres de Cabo Verde. Porque este livro é África. Este livro sou eu. A minha família, as minhas recordações, a língua, que por acaso está em português. Mas todo o sentimento, toda a emoção, toda a memória, todo o resgate é africano.
So it has occasionally been said to her, because of the language and because it's written in a correct Portuguese, not a Cape Verdian Portuguese or Africanized Portuguese, that anyone could have written this. She said, no, this could only have been written by me or by a woman from Cape Verde, because it's not just the words, it's the spirit behind the words, the story, and that's the language in a sense. Immaterial in that it's the code that's used.
I'm really interested in this idea of a mad woman. When I was young, when I was a young girl here in Nairobi, I have a very vivid image on TV of seeing a group of women who were beaten, and I remember seeing this woman bloody, and she was in the middle of Uhuru Park, and everybody in that space were calling her mad. She was a mad, crazy woman. And this woman was Wangari Maathai. She was the woman who saved our forests. She was the woman who was, I mean, you all know Wangari Maathai. And yet she was labeled crazy woman, mad woman. When a woman writes about a mad woman, what becomes possible that cannot be when a man writes about her?
Então, a falar pouco sobre o conceito da loucura, mas também o que quer dizer que ela é louca ou não, e que liberdade dá para uma mulher escrever sobre uma mulher louca em vez de um homem dizer ela é louca.
Sim. A loucura pode ser um disfarce, pode ser uma estratégia. Mas muitas vezes, de tanto termos este disfarce, torna a nossa própria pessoa.
So madness can sometimes be a disguise, a tactic, if you like. But from having worn the disguise for so long, it becomes part of who you are.
E é o papel em que essa mulher se sentia mais confortável, era um estado de louca. Também em Cabo Verde, muitas mulheres tornam-se loucas porque se sentem mais confortáveis no seu papel de louca.
So the Madwoman of Serrano makes a decision really that she feels more comfortable being considered mad. Maybe it frees her up. And outside the book, women in Cape Verde make that decision. Their life will be better or by being considered mad.
E temos... Eu acho que o nome bruxa tem conotação diferente de Cabo Verde com aqui. Porque nós amamos as nossas bruxas.
So there's also the word madwoman, but Dina's mentioned the word witch, in Portuguese is bruxa. She said she thinks that word has a different weight in Cape Verde compared to elsewhere, because in Cape Verde certainly we respect our witches. Or
I would like to read just another little passage, and then we open for questions. I want to give you a little bit more of a taste of this really beautiful writing. Do you have a passage that's your favorite, actually?
Se tu tem uma parte do livro que tu queres que leemos, uma parte favorita. No.
Do you?
Well, I suppose maybe I don't know if they're favorite, but when I did the sample translation, I picked maybe 3 sections to show different bits, and obviously I tried to pick bits that I thought were good. There's the bit where the midwife is the new midwife comes or explains the midwife. I mean, do you want me to read it? Okay, I'll find. So yeah, we haven't mentioned the midwife is a big character in this book.
Okay. So also the book is available at the bookshop, and Dina, will you sign? Yes? So, and Dina will sign. And look, people already have it. It is such a gorgeous book. I cannot even, yes.
I think is injustice.
Yes.
Choice
A
little
passage.
text
Okay.
of all text.
Okay.
Because I heard.
Yes. Yes. Okay. In that spirit, let us open up for questions and comments, and then allow you to soak it all in as a whole. Yes. Any questions or comments for Dina? Anything you'd like to know about here? And Jethro, translation, about language, about... I think many of you haven't had a chance to read the book yet because it's so hot off the press. Still fresh? Okay.
Hi everyone. This has been a very illuminating session. I love the concept of a mad woman because I guess growing up you kind of accept the women that you hear being labeled as mad, and then you grow up a bit more and then you realize they were just questioning things they didn't agree with, so then it becomes a thing that you kind of want to aspire to. So I'm just looking to soak in all the madness that I can. I don't know what I'll do with it, but I'm looking forward to the experience of reading this book and, you know, soaking in another mad woman's experience, and yeah.
O conceito de uma louca é interessante para ela, de jovem. Ela é louca e não pensas muito, depois pensa, não era louca, ela quer ser a mais louca possível. This is not an answer because it wasn't really a question, but for a translation point, it was difficult to translate the title or to decide on the. In Portuguese, it's louca, and so loco is the masculine of mad, and louca is the female of mad. So it's quite short, but you can clearly see, you know. Whereas it's a bit more of a mouthful, mad woman, but there wasn't really any other way. And then I decided this was the best, or least worst option, if you like, until I remembered the Mad Woman in the Attic, which is the name given. Well, it is used, but comes from literature as well. So, but I still wasn't sure about it as a choice. But over yesterday and today, everyone's been saying, "Oh, the Mad Woman." And it's a good title. It works.
Yeah, it is. Dina, what is the experience like for you coming to it after so many, 2 decades of writing it?
Como é a experiência? Escreveu em 92, vários anos depois, como...
Eu já tinha esquecido o conjunto do livro, porque em 20 anos a gente vai escrevendo outras coisas e vai esquecendo aquilo que já passou para trás. Mas a Louca de Serrano é muito estudado no Brasil e em outras partes, em Portugal, é muito referenciado. Então, ele tem-me acompanhado sempre, a Louca de Serrano.
So yeah, She wrote it in the early 90s, so a lot of time has passed. It's just she's forgotten about it as a whole, as the entire book. You remembers bits, but never totally left it alone because it kept reappearing. It's been studied especially in Brazil. There's been a sort of semi-regular academic interest. People have asked questions, so she's had to continually engage with it over the years. So on the one hand, it's been continuous, but the whole book itself is not the same. Answering the question, or adding to the answer, when we met to discuss the book, there were certain. I would ask Dina bits, and she would look puzzled and try to remember the bit, and we'd find it, and then she'd go, "Oh yeah," and explain, because you can't just ask a word; you need the context of where does that come from. And then there was a part where she sat back laughing and sort of said, "Oh, I really was pretty mad when I wrote this book." So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I would like to ask her a question.
Yes.
Follows on from the last, what we just said, but could you write this book now, do you think? Então, tu podes escrever este livro agora mesmo? Ou era uma coisa que você podias escrever na altura?
Quer dizer, eu acho que não podia escrever este livro agora, porque a sociedade está diferente. São 20 anos. E foi depois da independência. Então agora já construímos muitas coisas. O nosso problema agora, eu ia escrever este livro, mas com outros problemas. Eu ia pôr a violência doméstica, a violência de género, como focos principais deste livro.
So no, really this was of its time, which is the early 90s, 20 years ago. Things have changed. It was also much closer to independence in Cape Verde. It was more of a newer thing then. Things have changed for the better, but if she was to write it now, the focus would be more on domestic violence. If she was to write the same book, that would maybe be the focus. As an aside, it gets mentioned. It's not that there isn't. That's not a subject. That subject is in there, but what she means is it would be more front.
Eu ia falar de fronteiras. Eu ia falar de fronteiras que se fecham para os cabo-verdianos e para as cabo-verdianas. Nós não somos aceitos com facilidade na Europa, nos Estados Unidos ou na África continental.
And sort of moving on from that, but also a general point, she'd like to speak about borders. In Portuguese, it's frontiers, borders, boundaries, whatever we want to call them. Because Cape Verde is quite uniquely positioned in that there are often borders put up by Africa, Europe, the US. Cape Verde is not far from the US, really. And yet, quite often, there are borders, imaginary, with each one.
Eu ia falar que agora as mulheres não estão em silêncio, como em Louca de Serrano. Elas agora falam, elas têm voz, elas discutem, elas lutam pelos seus direitos.
But unlike in the time of Louca de Serrano, when it was written, women do now have a voice. They're not silenced so much then. They fight, they speak up.
It's been called a feminist novel. How do you feel about that?
Eu espero que sim, que seja um livro feminista, porque eu sou feminista.
I hope that it is called a feminist novel because I am a feminist.
Amen. Yes. Jethro, how do you, I just want to talk a little bit again about translation. How do you translate tone? Because there's such a cheeky, maybe the word is cheeky. There's like a cheeky tone about the writing.
Yeah, with any translations, I mean, you can worry yourself to death about whether you've got it right. I remember hearing a very well-known translator of Portuguese, Margaret Gil Costa, say she sometimes worries that all her translations sound like Margaret Gil Costa, but eventually she trusts herself that no, by doing enough drafts, the spirit comes through, and that's my feeling. That by the time I've finished translating this book, I have done so many drafts. I've maybe spent more time even than the author. I mean, probably not, but I've examined everything over and over and over again. That, you know, I do trust that the tone, the spirit, that playfulness comes through. I do background reading. I ask questions. So I will ask questions to Dina. We do some questions it can be via email, but if possible, it's better to meet up. If that's, Dina sometimes comes to Lisbon where I live, and some of the questions will be about a word or a phrase, but some of them are just, maybe I don't need to know the answer, but I want to see how she answers it so that I get a feel to test whether my instinct was right. And I'm happy to say, yeah, usually I think yes, I was on the right lines there. So yeah, it's a combination of trusting your instinct, plus just draft after draft after draft. You immerse yourself in that book, it's gonna come out.
How many drafts do you think? How long did it take?
It's very difficult to say, because even if you don't just start at the beginning, go to the end, start at the beginning, go to the end. Some passages were very difficult. Some of them were a bit easier to do. So sometimes it's better to focus on a passage. I would say it is the hardest book I've translated. It took me the most time. I mean, and that's not that's a compliment, because yeah, it has a freedom. I maybe would say also because it was published in Cape Verde by a small publisher, Spleen Edições. So I have the print copy was not rigorously edited, I'd say. Then Dina sent me a PDF, which was, I think, from the Brazilian version, which had been edited a little bit. So there were a few changes. So I also had to compare a bit. And also, yeah, sort of work out sometimes where through a printing error, a comma is not there, which shows where the sentence. So I'm trying to join two words and then realize, no, there should be a comma here. So that, but you know, that again, if we ignore the difficult books, if we know books that have not been thoroughly edited in the place where that's not possible, we're not going to ever get these books to a wider audience. So.
Did you travel to Cape Verde?
I have been to Cape Verde, yeah. Before, so the first time I started reading the book, then I went on holiday and bought the book. And Serrano, I told Dina afterwards, she's from Santo Antão, which is an island that I did visit. And one day we went to the north of the island and took a walk into a mountain village. I was with Rachel, who's sitting over here, and we just stopped for a coffee, and suddenly people came to talk to us. And there was a man who just sat down, and he said, "Oh, you're from England?" He spoke in English. He said, "I've been to," and he'd been to several ports in Britain and all around the world. I mean, he'd been to lots of different places. And then he said, so's he. So there was these 5 guys who'd seen half the world and come back. And we left thinking, wow, this sleepy little village in the middle of the mountains, and yet they've been to 20 countries and seen a lot, but come back. So if I was ever in doubt or wanted to place myself there, then that was where I imagined it to be. And I think probably some of Dina's imagination was there as well. Same. So yeah, she says that a lot of people say that Serrano is obviously on her island, Santo Antão. They know Serrano. I mean, it's a bit of a Macondo
Right,
as well,
that's what I
isn't
was
it?
going to say. It's like Macondo. Yeah, an imagined place of possibility. But what does Serrano represent to you?
Quer dizer, muitas vezes nós atribuímos magia a uma dificuldade. Uma coisa má, uma coisa feia, ou a uma coisa muito bonita, uma coisa muito suave.
So we often ascribe magic to things that are difficult or ugly or that we don't want to face the truth up to, but also to beautiful things as well.
And I think that's a really beautiful note to wind up. I understand there's Kizomba later this evening, and there's a storytelling show. Congratulations, Dina. Congratulations, Jethro. Thank you for bringing this book to Nairobi, and we are so grateful.
Thank you very much for interviewing us.
Please make sure you buy your copy, and I promise you it is really, really gorgeous. Welcome back to Nairobi.